You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. Chase Sr. here with you. Coming your way on today's show, will Howie Roseman wheel and deal? We're going to take a look at some trade targets the Eagles could pursue to improve their already stacked roster leading up to the NFL trade deadline. And I understand a lot of people are probably watching right now saying, well, I'm not sure, Chase, that Philadelphia has a weakness. And up to this point, through 3 weeks, I think that is indeed true. Eagles, one of the more deeper, well-constructed rosters in the NFL. And you take a look at how they've done so far offensively and defensively. Offensive numbers to the left on your screen, defensive numbers across the league to your right. Points per game, Birds top 5. Yards per game, they're number 1. Passing yards per game, also number 1. Rushing yards per game, Philadelphia checking in at 7th as that ground game has really taken a back seat to this elite passing approach. Scoring margin, 3rd in the National Football League at plus 12, especially the last 2 weeks where the Eagles, go Birds, have thoroughly dominated their opponents in the Vikings and the Commanders. Defensively now, points per game still really good, only allowing a shade under 17 points per outing. Yards per game is 5th in this really elite offensive era. Passing yards allowed per matchup, 6th at 183.7. Rushing yards per game can be a little bit better, but really they're doing a good job of generating a pass rush as they did against Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz. So if you have to substitute something along the defense, I'll take the pass rush over the rush defense, which I think over time will get a little bit better because I like this linebacking core and I like this defensive line. And after that 9-sack performance against Washington, the Eagles now have 12 sacks, 2nd in the NFL behind. How about them Cowboys? And you ask yourself this, when you watch the Eagles up to this point, when you dive into the tape, when you really get down to the nitty-gritty, do they have a weakness? And so far, the answer to that question, not many weaknesses, if any. But we know this about Howie Roseman, and this is why he's one of the best general managers in the sport. He's certainly redeemed himself the last couple of years after a couple of down years following that Super Bowl championship. He always stays aggressive. He goes to bed and wakes up thinking of ways to really improve his football team. That's why the saying has become popular, how he do that. And the Eagles right now seem to be all in. That's really what points to the roster construction being where it is. And if the Eagles are all in like they are, then be a big baller, push your poker chips to the middle of the table, and try to improve this roster even further if you want to be a bona fide Super Bowl contender, which right now the Philadelphia Eagles are. So coming up around the corner, we'll take a look at some of those Eagles trade targets, some really big names that could be available via the trade market. First, though, you examine all teams in the NFL. Where do you think the Eagles are in your power rankings? Here at Chat Sports, I listed them number 1 ahead of the Miami Dolphins, so I'm typing my 1. Where do you have the Birds fly? Eagles fly right down into the comment section. 32 teams in the NFL. You get the gist there. So a player who we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks is Robert Quinn, the edge rusher for the Chicago Bears. Surprisingly, Chicago is 2-1 on the young campaign. So his trade candidacy may have gotten knocked down just a bit, but let's say that the Chicago Bears over the next couple of weeks, they start to free fall a little bit, and they're more like the team that we thought was going to be going into this year where they're a lackluster football unit. Could they look to trade away a player like Robert Quinn? And the Eagles right now, 9 sacks against Washington. It's really not sustainable throughout this 18-week, 17-game schedule. And I was really impressed with what the Eagles did defensively against the Vikings and defensively against the Commanders, especially along that defensive line with the twist stunts, some of the delayed blitzes, the timely blitzes as well. I don't, though, after the injury to Derek Barnett, absolutely love the depth at that edge rusher spot, and Robert Quinn would be able to really give you another really good player and improve your depth in the process. Now, up to this point, through 3 games, he's been somewhat silent as compared to some of his previous seasons. 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 quarterback hit, and 5 tackles. The caveat with Robert Quinn as well is that the Eagles and many teams across the league would have to free up some money because you look at his contract as he's in his early 30s here, probably on the last couple of holes if you're going to make that golf course reference of his career. Little less than $13 million in base salary this year, nearly $14 next, and then it goes back down to $12.9 in 2024. So The expensive nature of his contract probably makes him somewhat unlikely, and the Bears winning also helps that cause, but still a player that has been rumored to be on the trade block over the last couple of months. With this Eagles team right now, I asked you earlier to pose that question for yourself, do the Birds have a weakness? Well, what's their biggest area of need and the area in which you think they need to improve that roster at? Let me know right now in the comment section. A programming alert here on Philadelphia Eagles Now. A lot of you are new to the channel. We've been going live every single Thursday, 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific. The live shows have been absolutely awesome, and they've been a blast, and we're going to be going live again on Thursday. Make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications. The goal prior to kickoff on Sunday, 33,000 subscribers. And speaking of kickoff on Sunday, going to be doing another watch party against the Jaguars. It all kicks off with our pregame show, 12:45 p.m. Eastern, for the return of Doug Peterson to Lincoln Financial Field in South Philadelphia. Lock us in if you want informative, entertaining Eagles news, rumors, and analysis. It's youtube.com/Eagles Now. More trade targets to get to. Let's go now to the offensive side of the rock at running back. Another one of the question marks on this team if Miles Sanders were to go down, because the depth pieces, Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. And up to this point, the Raiders have really been a disaster this year, and Josh Jacobs has actually been pretty good with a horrible offensive line. And I actually have been pleasantly pleased with what the running back production has been for this offense, because the pass game for Jalen Hurts and Philadelphia, led by Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni, has exceeded all expectations. Miles Sanders, folks, is sneakily having a pretty good year, and I wouldn't hate to see him back beyond this year if they re-sign him to a deal that is affordable on the books. 45 carries, 222 yards for him, average yards per carry sub 5. Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, 10 carries apiece, limited workload for them, but really it's been Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts leading the charge on the ground game. And for me, Miles Sanders, I think, has been awesome. He's run in between the tackles. He's been decisive. He showed some patience when he's needed to in this ground game, allowing the blocks to get set up on some of those pulls, and then allowing Jason Kelce, for instance, to get to that second level. And again, the pass game has overshadowed how good Miles Sanders has been. And is he better than Josh Jacobs, or is Josh Jacobs better than him? I want you to pose that question to yourself right now, and then we'll pose it officially here in just a couple of moments. But Jacobs, in a similar situation as Miles Sanders. He was a first-round pick, but he's going into the final year of his rookie deal, or is in the final year of his rookie deal, and the Raiders did not exercise his fifth-year option. So it looks as though they have no plans of giving a running back here a second contract, and despite a porous offensive line, Josh Jacobs, 42 totes, 192 yards, 4.5 yards per carry, a long of 18. And I want to take a look at some of the analytics here. I don't get too nerdy with this type of stuff. I'll look at the All-22. I'll look at Pro Football Focus. There are good indicators there, but you can't fully rely on just the analytics. Rushing yards over expected average here. That's the difference between rush yards and expected rush yards on a play or a series of plays. And what's interesting about Josh Jacobs, he could feast in Philly behind this really good offensive line, because the Raiders have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. I think Philly has the best. Jacobs has the fourth highest rush yards over expectancy percentage, meaning even when the blocking sucks, he's still picking up more than 4 yards per carry. That right there, a pretty good indicator. So I previewed this question just moments ago. Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders. Who do you think is better between these two backs? JJ for Jacobs, MS for Miles Sanders. I'm going to go Miles Sanders slightly, but the durability concerns might give the edge to Josh Jacobs here. Our sportsbook partner, BetUS, is today's sponsor. Stay locked and loaded with us here on the show. More trade candidates to get to. Chatsports.com/EaglesBet. Promo code Eagles125 for a 125% deposit bonus. And let's just say that you're really liking the odds for Jalen Hurts to win NFL MVP at plus 600 odds. Let's say you put down $1 and he ends up winning winning it. The value checks out, getting about $6 back. Pretty good value there for Jalen Hurts. And also, we are still doing our jersey deal thanks to BetUS. Only 2 undefeated teams remain in the National Football League. It's the Dolphins, it's the Eagles. 2 jersey deals for both of those channels here at Chat Sports. You can get hooked up by signing up, chatsports.com/EaglesBet, promo code Eagles125, deposit at least $100, make a bet, and then we'll send you a free Eagles jersey thanks to our friends at Fanatics. All you got to do, follow these steps here, and then when you do follow those steps, email us, jersey@chatsports.com, just letting us know. Don't worry, we're going to get back to everybody. We've had so many responses because this fan base is so passionate, and you want free Eagles gear. Just be patient with us. We'll get you that free jersey. All right, more trade targets to get to. Let's now pivot to D'Ernest Johnson. Of the 2 backs here that we're talking about, Josh Jacobs, D'Ernest Johnson, I think that DJ is the most likely. And it's pretty wild that he's not even playing for the Cleveland Browns because last year he averaged more than 5 yards per carry. As for his trade value, this coming from Mary Kay Cabot, who is the go-to Browns reporter, I think this is kind of nuts, and maybe there's a team personnel executive in her ear who's pointing to this 4th-round pick value, but she said Johnson is here for quality depth in Cleveland, but the Browns would likely consider trading him if the price were right. They wouldn't get a top draft pick for him because his contract is up after this year, and he's been a backup, but if someone offered them a 4th-round pick, they'd have to give it some thought. Jerome Ford has made Johnson a luxury to keep around, in part because Ford returns kicks. So that's pretty interesting for a couple of reasons. DJ going into the final year of his deal as well, going to be a free agent. He was good last year once Kareem Hunt went down, and he was the backup for Nick Chubb. But Jerome Ford, the rookie out of Cincinnati, has basically replaced him. And Johnson has only been active for 1 game. He hasn't even gotten a carry yet this year. A 4th-round pick, though, Howie Roseman, he could probably finesse something there, get him for a 5th, 6th, especially because the Eagles do have a lot of draft capital in the draft coming up. Would you give up a 4th-round pick for DJ? I would not. I'm going to go ahead and submit my P for pass. If you do it, give me a T for trade if you're with me. Hey, give me that P down in the comment section. That sounded weird, but just type P down in the comment section. Okay, lastly, Jessie Bates, safety for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals off to a surprising 1-2 start. Joe Burrow got that appendectomy this offseason during training camp. I don't think he's looked right. He's looked a little bit rusty. And the Bengals, they've really just been an average team. Nice little win over the New York Jets in Week 3. Look, a couple of weeks ago, Eagles could have used an upgrade at safety, but in fact, I've been pleasantly surprised with what Marcus Epps has been able to do. Now, going back to my original point about analytics and stuff, like the average for Pro Football Focus grades is at 70. So Marcus Epps is below that at 65.5. I think he's been a better player than that. I think his instincts have been good. He's laid the lick on a couple of players with bringing the boom on some of that physicality. He's got an overall grade here at 65.5. Run defense, sub 68. Pass rush, who cares? 59.6 is not really a box safety. And then a coverage grade of 63.1. He's actually been better than Jessie Bates. And the thing about Pro Football Focus, these analysts, they do watch every single snap and then they break it down into their grading criteria. But Marcus Epps, through 3 games, has been a better safety, according to Pro Football Focus, than Jessie Bates, who's playing on the franchise tag and making a lot of money. You see how the numbers stack up there. Now, Bates, I think, is a good player. Bates, I think, would play well in this scheme. The problem with that, Marcus Epps is a lot cheaper, and Jessie Bates is probably going to be due for a large contract after this year. You already made the trade for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I like what he brings to the table on that nickel safety hybrid, and he's also in the final year of his deal. So he's probably looking for money as well. But again, good businesses tend to look ahead, and Howie Roseman is a good football executive. They're having these types of conversations of, okay, how can we upgrade our roster even though right now we're playing pretty well? So the 4 trade targets that we're talking about on today's show, we'll probably refresh this leading up to the NFL trade deadline, middle portion of the year. We're only 3 weeks in, so it's more than a month away. Robert Quinn, Josh Jacobs, D'Ernest Johnson, and Jessie Bates. Which of these trade targets is your favorite, and which player do you think adds the most to this team? RQ for Robert Quinn, JJ for Josh Jacobs, DJ for Dearness Johnson, JB for Jessie Bates. Let me know. And lastly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Join us on Thursday for our live show. It's going to be the Trace and Chase show once more. Eagles now. The real ones know. And then a watch party coming your way on Sunday.